in the region. Turning to the Strait of Hormuz, Mr. Speaker, people and businesses are increasingly worried about the economic impact of this war, and the Prime Minister will chair a COBRA meeting later this afternoon to discuss the economic impact, which I will attend. Because Iran is holding the Strait of Hormuz hostage by laying mines, targeting ships, including Red Ensign vessels, and putting lives in danger. This is complex, and any resolution requires close work with allies and multinational support. So the UK, along with 29 other nations, signed a joint statement late last week, which condemned in the strongest terms these attacks on unarmed ships, strongly backed the freedom of navigation, and expressed our readiness, I quote, to contribute to appropriate efforts to ensure safe passage through the strait. I discussed this with E5 defence ministers last week. We've now deployed UK military planners into US Central Command to develop options. We're looking to accelerate new UK mine hunting and drone technology. And on Friday, we confirmed that the current permission we've given for the US to use UK bases for defensive strikes against specific Iranian targets extends to their missile sites and capabilities that threaten the Strait of Hormuz. We are determined that the UK plays a leading role in securing the strait, so commercial ships can move freely and confidently again. Mr. Speaker, this House knows the demands on defence are rising, and while we rightly focus on dealing with the immediate conflict in the Middle East, we will continue to step up our support to Ukraine, to fulfil our NATO commitments, to sign vital defence contracts, and to deal with Putin's serious threats to the high north. Mr. Speaker, this House also knows that our adversaries will want us distracted and may try to take advantage of events in the Middle East for their own gain. We will not let them. And as a government, we remain determined to make Britain safer, more secure at home, and strong abroad.
Show Secretary of State James Cartledge.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And can I thank the Secretary of State for advance side of his statement and for the briefing I received from his officials this afternoon. But can I begin by joining the Secretary of State by putting on record my utter condemnation of the arson attack committed in Golders Green last night, and on behalf of the opposition, I offer our sympathy to all affected and to the wider Jewish community. Can I also join the Secretary of State in expressing our condolences to the families of all Allied personnel who have lost their lives in the current conflict, and in thanking the police for preventing potentially serious nefarious activity at Faz Lane. Mr. Speaker, the potential economic ramifications for our constituents from Iran's aggressive closure of the Straits of Hormuz should concern us all. In that context, can the Defence Secretary tell the House what he understands to be the implications of the US President's latest remarks, specifically on deferring strikes on power plants? And can he also tell us what further naval capability he is intending to deploy to assist in securing the Straits of Hormuz? Mr. Speaker, it is extremely concerning that Iran fired long-range ballistic missiles at UK sovereign territory on Diego Garcia. Now, I'm grateful for his update, but why did it take so long for the government to confirm something that the whole world had been reporting on? And what action is he going to take to respond to those wholly unjustified attacks? Can he confirm if the potential firing range of this Iranian missile implies that it could reach well into Europe? Now, when it comes to our own air defence, it is very welcome that the RAF regiment has excelled in using rapid sentry procured under the previous government to intercept multiple drones, and we pay tribute to all our personnel in the region at this present moment. We also welcome the fact that this capability is now being deployed to support our allies in the region, and we hope that the air defence system he is sending to Bahrain will be in position as soon as possible. But we note reports that at least one of the Iranian missiles fired at Diego Garcia was intercepted by a US destroyer. Is it correct that the US intercepted this missile before the government decided on Saturday to grant the US further permission for use of our bases? Doesn't this once again underline Labour's extraordinary double standards, that until their latest U-turn, the government had been relying on the US to defend us whilst denying them the use of our bases? And given reports that the Iranian missile headed for Diego Garcia was intercepted by a US destroyer, this underlines the critical importance of our Type 45s when it comes to our own air defence. So whilst we welcome HMS Dragon finally arriving, does he regret not sending her much, much sooner? As he knows, the Type 45 Sea Viper air defence system relies on Aster missiles. Last week, I wrote to him, urging him to use the HMT reserve funding for the Middle East operations to urgently procure missiles needed for the Middle East, including LMM for our Wildcat and Rapid Sentry, ASRAAM for our fighter jets, and Aster for the Type 45s. Since then, he's confirmed the order of LMM, which I welcome. Will he now use the reserve to order more air defence missiles for our ships and fighter planes? Of course, if our Type 45s are to intercept the most sophisticated ballistic missiles, they need the Sea Viper system upgraded to Sea Viper Evolution, which I have repeatedly asked ministers to accelerate, as it is currently scheduled to enter service in 2032. Now, when I was a defence minister, Mr. Speaker, HMS Diamond was under attack by the Houthis in the Red Sea, using expensive missiles to intercept cheap drones. So I scrapped a load of red tape that accelerated.
क्या हो गया भाई?
भैया आपसे सीखकर म्यूचुअल फंड्स में एसआईपी शुरू की थी, लेकिन कभी-कभी अपडेट्स देखकर मेरा मन भटकने लगता है।
सुन, ये लिफ्ट जब ऊपर नीचे जाती है तो तू निकल जाता है।
नहीं भैया, यही तो सही मंजिल तक ले जाती है।
तो बस म्यूचुअल फंड्स का भी यही है, डटे रहेगा तो तू भी अपने सपनों के पास पहुंच सकता है।
हाँ, बिल्कुल आपकी तरह।
सही है।
म्यूचुअल फंड निवेश बाजार जोखिमों के अधीन है। योजना से जुड़े सभी दस्तावेजों को ध्यान से पढ़ें।
And the Secretary of State couldn't tell us then whether they would publish the DIP before recess. So given that there are once again just 4 sitting days left before recess, and that he must know his diary for the week ahead, can the Secretary of State tell us, will the Defence Investment Plan be published before the rise of the House on Thursday? If not, will he publish it during PERDA? And above all, if the DIP is not going to be published this week, to break the logjam with the Treasury, will he urge his Chancellor to take the difficult decisions required to set a course for spending 3% on defence this Parliament, not the next? And finally, surely even the Secretary of State can see that hypothetical legal action in UNCLOS by a country without a navy or a standing army is less of a threat to our base on Diego Garcia than long-range missiles fired by Iran. So isn't the best way he could stand up for our sovereign territory on Diego Garcia by scrapping Labour's crazy Chagos deal and spending every penny on the British Armed Forces?
For defence.
Mr. Speaker, can I welcome his initial comments about the loss of French and US personnel and recognise and respect those. He asked me first about the comments from President Trump today, which I'm sure the whole House will welcome President Trump's statement today. It's recognition that there is progress in conversations about, and he says, the complete and total resolution of our hostilities in the Middle East, and his instruction to hold off further strikes against Iranian power plants. This creates the opportunity and opening for further de-escalation. The onus is now on Iran to respond. Mr. Speaker, the CU then went on to the strikes that I reported of the missiles fired in the direction of Diego Garcia. And I would just say to him, look, we have been blunt and we have been open about the threat that Iran poses. The threat it poses to British nationals, to British bases, and to British interests and partners. And to suggest otherwise is completely false. And that's why we've been conducting the defensive operations throughout the region since day one of this war. Those missiles were fired towards Diego Garcia early on Friday morning. The same day I offered the Shadow Defence Secretary to come into the MOD for a secure briefing, and I welcome his thanks for that. But he, above all, as a former defence minister, will know that no government routinely comments on the detail of such threats due to the nature of intelligence sharing. He will also know that no government immediately confirms such events, partly because in any conflict, events are fast moving, but mainly because to do so may put at risk the safety of military personnel or compromise ongoing operations. And I just say to the honourable gentleman to bear that in mind for the future. I want to reassure the public, however, about the concern and question he raises about long-range Iranian missiles and any question of Iran targeting the UK. And say quite clearly, there is no assessment that we're being targeted in the UK in that way. We have the resources, we have the alliances in place in order to keep the United Kingdom safe from any kind of attacks. We operate a layered defence of this United Kingdom, our Navy, our RAF, our Army, all involved. And of course, we operate our defence with other NATO allies. And so it's the layered defence against missiles or any sort of other threats, which is an important part of keeping this country safe. And I say to the honourable gentleman, it seems to have taken a war in the Middle East for him to realise that air and missile defence systems for the UK are important. No, because in the last year of his government, they slashed defence spending on ground-based air defence by 70%. Because when he was defence minister, he promised a munitions strategy, which he never published and was never funded. And it was down to this government last June, as part of the Strategic Defence Review, that announced an extra £1 billion for air and missile defence above the Tory plans that he left. And Mr. Speaker, it's UK under this government that has been leading NATO's Diamond Air and Missile Defence Initiative. It's this government that this year alone has boosted spending on counter-drone systems fivefold from his last year in government, and spending on ground-based air defence systems by 50%. Mr. Speaker, it's this government that's delivering for defence after 14 years of underfunding and hollowing out under the previous government. And I have to say, I'm still very confused about the Conservatives' position on this war in Iran. One week, the leader of the opposition said UK jets must go in to the source in Iran, and she said, I quote, "We are in this war whether we like it or not." And then the next week she said, "I never said we should join." The week after that, the Shadow Defence Secretary said on Sky News, there are no easy answers to this. Mr. Speaker. Finally, he talks about defence investment planning and spending. We're working to finalise the DIP. But he was, of course, the Defence Minister that left 47 out of 49 major defence programmes not on budget, not on time. He was the one that left a defence programme that was overcommitted, underfunded and deeply unsuited to the threats that we now face. It is this government, it is a Labour government now delivering for defence. 1,200 major contracts signed since July 2024, 84% of them awarded to British businesses, and the largest increase in defence spending since the end of the Cold War.
Diane Abbott.
The Iranian regime is a threat to us all, not least to its own population. I would implore ministers to remember the importance of a debate in Parliament, just as we had on Iraq, if we move further in involvement with Trump's war.
Mr. Speaker, the Mother of the House speaks with long and deep experience of these matters. I would just say to her that the Prime Minister himself has said, while we are taking the necessary action to defend ourselves and our allies, we will not be drawn into the wider war.
James McCleary, Liberal Democrat spokesperson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you to the Secretary of State for advance sight of his statement today. We are 4 weeks on from the start of President Trump's illegal assault on Iran. Still, there is no plan, no end in sight. It is not Trump, nor indeed his partner in this ill-conceived war, Netanyahu, who are paying the price. It is hard-pressed British families seeing it in their energy bills and at the petrol pump. It is billions around the world suffering economic fallout. And it is over 100 little girls who will never be coming home from school. Rather than de-escalate the crisis, Trump is just making more threats. Instead of accepting responsibility, he is pointing fingers at allies, including Britain. There is much then that I hope this House can agree on at this critical moment. Most importantly, that Britain's interests are only served by rapid de-escalation of hostilities. Liberal Democrats have not wavered from this view. I believe it reflects in many ways the broadly responsible approach this government, including the Defence Secretary, have taken to the war, emphasising the need for multilateral diplomacy while protecting our personnel and citizens under immediate threat in the region. Nonetheless, the government's decision over the weekend to expand the use of UK bases for US strikes is grave and risks dragging Britain down the slope of Trump's war. It appears to be a significant shift in the government's position. So I would like to ask the Secretary of State, if I may, 3 questions. Does he agree with me that the government's definition of defensive is different today than it was when the House last sat? Will he commit to releasing in full the legal advice the government has received about this latest expansion of rights of US planes to use UK bases? And will he support Liberal Democrat proposed legislation to ensure proper monitoring of US sorties conducted from UK bases to ensure they are truly defensive in nature?
Mr. Speaker, the country's best interests are served by the action that we've taken, both before and since the start of this period of the war. Actions to defend our personnel, our bases, our allies, and our interests throughout the region. He's right to say our interests are also served best by an end to the conflict, which we want to see happen now. And therefore, we welcome President Trump's move to step back from further attacks on Iranian power plant and oil infrastructure. This creates the opportunity for further de-escalation, which he calls for, and I hope he would recognize that the onus is now on Iran to respond in kind. And he asked me the specific question. There has been, as I've stressed to the House, no change in the principles on which our approach and our action and our decisions are based. And these are permissions for the UK, for the US to use UK bases for defensive actions because they are striking at the very Iranian sites and capabilities which are attacking our interests and those of our partners in the region.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the Secretary of State is right to draw attention to the fact that when we became Secretary of State and draw his attention to the fact that the armed forces...
एक प्रकार से पीएम जय अब गरीबों की जय बन गई है। देश हो रहा है आयुष्मान, मुफ्त उपचार मिल रहा, अब कोई लाचार ना रहा, जन जन का हो रहा कल्याण, गरीबों की शान ये है स्वास्थ्य का वरदान।
So can I ask the Secretary of State what discussions are taking place in government to accelerate the expenditure to at least 3% in this Parliament and as quickly as possible?
Well, my honourable friend is more knowledgeable than perhaps anyone else in the House about defence matters, having been a former Defence Minister and served for some time on the Defence Select Committee. I appreciate his recognition of the way that since the election that we have stepped up the scale of investment in autonomous systems, counter-drone systems, integrated missile and air defence systems, all of which were badly lacking under the previous governments. And I say to him, he will have followed an important speech that the Prime Minister gave 3 or 4 weeks ago at Munich, in which he recognised, as this House does, that demands on defence are rising. He recognised, as this House does, that this is an era now of hard power, of strong alliances and sure diplomacy, and he recognised, as this House does, that we now need to spend more faster on defence.
So Julian Lewis.
May I remind Defence Ministers yet again that they should not be comparing increases in defence expenditure with the post-Cold War years, but with what we used to spend during the Cold War years, which was between 4.5% and 5% of GDP on defence. And can he look the House straight in the eye, as it were, and say that given the very close relationship between China and the Mauritians, including a 25-year treaty of cooperation, that it would be a sounder situation if Mauritius had sovereignty over Diego Garcia and we were only lessees to them?
I respect the right honourable gentleman, and the straight answer to his question is yes, I can, because the deal that we have in place that is awaiting the ratification would give our operational sovereignty over Diego Garcia for at least 99 years. This is a base that is central and essential to our and the US security and military around the world. And I say to him also that the deal that we have on the table now and have negotiated with the Mauritians gives greater protections in the waters around, greater veto over developments on the other islands, which is why it is so much better a deal than after 11 rounds of negotiation under the previous government they left when they left office.
John Trickett.
Mr. Speaker, and I join with my right honourable friend in paying tribute to the members of the armed forces and acknowledge too the difficult path which he has to tread. But the government's stated objective was to achieve de-escalation of this war led by diplomacy, and yet the truth is that the US planes leaving British soil, which he authorised without parliamentary consent, are not carrying diplomats, are they? They're carrying heavy payloads. So my question is this, because the Secretary of State said he wants this actions to be legal. What protocols has he agreed with the United States to ensure that those bombers are operating within international and national law and in a defensive capacity only? Anything else leads to a slippery slope from defence into offence.
The permissions that we have granted in response to specific US requests are operations that are restricted to defensive legal purposes that strike at the capabilities that are doing most to hold at risk and attack our interests and our allies and our personnel. So I say to the honourable gentleman, it is part of an established system of requesting such basing operations. with a system that ensures that the US respects the permissions they've requested and allows us to ensure that is and continues to be the case. And on the matter of de-escalation, I say to my honourable friend, I hope he was encouraged and he will recognise the leadership that Keir Starmer and the UK played at the end of last week when we led the work that has produced the statement now signed by 29 other countries, which is calling for the coordinated development of options, the condemnation of Iranian attacks and closure of the Strait of Hormuz, and recognises the enormous impact that this is having across the world, including for people and businesses in this country about which so many are so concerned.
Thank
you, Mr. Speaker. There's a glaring contradiction between the Defence Secretary's statement, which says, and I quote, taking the necessary action to strengthen our collective defence, whilst also then announcing to the House that we will have another recess without the Defence Investment Plan. But does he recognise that the Defence Committee, which has a majority of Labour members on it, said last year that demand signals will not exist until the Defence Investment Plan is published? And at a time when so many other allies are investing in defence, does he not recognise that delaying that plan is likely to stoke inflation, undermining the spend as and when it comes?
Mr. Speaker, I say to the right honourable gentleman, we're working to finalise the plan. We're working flat out to do that. But it has not held up important decisions that we've made, contracts that we've been able to let, over 1,200 since the election, major contracts, the majority of which have been let to British businesses and British firms, creating British jobs, reinforcing the innovation base in this country, and demonstrating that defence under this government is becoming an engine for growth.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The availability of Type 45s is directly as a result of the severe defence cuts enacted by the party opposite in 2010. And so it is incredulous that you comment on their availability without giving an apology. However, whilst we recognise that there perhaps isn't a Iranian missile capable of travelling the 2,000 kilometres to the Chagos Islands, would the right honourable member recognise that were to be one, it would show a worrying proliferation of technology from North Korea and Russia, and would he agree with me that this shows that we must continue to support Ukraine in its war against Russia?
I do indeed, Mr. Speaker. My honourable friend speaks with the authority of his service experience and his service in this House on the Defence Select Committee. He reminds the House, as I did at the end of my statement, that with all eyes on the Middle East, we cannot lift our focus and deflect our priority also for stepping up support for Ukraine and learning the lessons as the Strategic Defence Review encourages us to do from Ukraine. But he's absolutely right to remind the party opposite that they were the ones who cut the number of frigates and destroyers by a quarter during their 14 years in office, the number of mine hunters by more than a half, and the defence budget in their first 5 years by fully £12 billion.
Richard Ford.
The Secretary of State in his statement talked a lot about British hardware, but coercing an adversary also requires that we understand their war aims and their beliefs. In Iraq, we learned late about the need to develop cultural awareness. Martyrdom is central to Shia Islam and is viewed as redemptive suffering. Alongside all of the kit that the Secretary of State talked about, will the government also invest in cultural capability?
So, State.
Mr. Speaker, I'm a somewhat simple man. I'm not really clear what cultural capabilities really means, but if the honourable gentleman would like to write to me with his proposition, I'd be very happy to have a look at it.
Mohammed Jassim.
Mr. Speaker, one of the clearest lessons of the Chilcot inquiry is that UK must be prepared to say no to US, where British interests, legal standards, and global stability are at risk. So will the government hold firm and not be drawn further into this conflict by a so-called ally whose conduct is unpredictable, insulting, destabilizing, and in my view, deranged?
So stay.
Well, Mr. Speaker, let me say again, while we're taking the necessary action to defend our interests and our allies, as the Prime Minister has made clear to this House and in public, we will not get drawn into the wider war.
Kim Bolton.
Mr. Speaker, the Secretary of State was right when he said we all breathed a sigh of relief at the American president stepping back from the abyss this morning, the abyss of an attack on Iran's power network. However, it still remains the case that just a few days ago, a projectile fell within 350 meters of Iran's only nuclear power station. Now, the Secretary of State spoke compellingly about the courage of British personnel in defending our own assets in the region and those of our allies. If it were to come to our attention that in an era of irrational decision-making, an attack against that nuclear power station was contemplated, with the catastrophic effect it would have on the region, what steps could and would we take to prevent that attack?
The right honourable gentleman's an old hand in this House. He's also, I think, served in a number of security posts in government. He would be the last person to expect me to speculate on futures or hypothetical scenarios like that. But the points he makes at the start of his question are really important. The opportunity now, based on the President's declaration this morning and his instruction to his Department of War to hold off further attacks on Iranian power plants and infrastructure for the next 5 days, gives...
Your business can't afford to stand still. At Kinetic 319, we help growing brands connect media, GEO, content writing, and performance analytics to drive real business outcomes. Learn more at kinetic319.com.
And to see an early end to this conflict.
Stella Cruz.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Further to my honourable friend's comments, and I thank him for this detailed update. It is really important that our constituents understand how serious this is, because energy traders right now are like those epidemiologists in February 2020 looking at energy sources and shortages as those epidemiologists looked at COVID and how it was spreading around the world, working out how on earth to warn people of the horrors to come. The brutal reality is, if this war does not end, we could see energy shortages that will have a lasting economic effect on this country for decades. Now, my honourable friend says there that the President has agreed to a 5-day suspension and to not target the Iranian power plants. He will know how serious this is. How confident is he that the President will stick to that 5-day pledge and give a chance for the urgent de-escalation our economy and our world needs?
My honourable friend makes the clearest and strongest possible case for an early end to this conflict, for the imperative to embrace this opportunity that President Trump has created. And as she rightly says, the impending potential impact on the world economy, on the lifestyle and costs of all families and businesses in this country is severe. And that is the reason why the Prime Minister will be chairing a COBRA this afternoon that will look at the economic potential impacts of this conflict, a meeting that I will attend, and no doubt the House will be updated in due course.
Dr. Ross Savage.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to remind the House that RAF Fairford is in my constituency of the South Cotswolds. So it's with grave concern that I note the news of 2 missiles being aimed at Diego Garcia. The Prime Minister previously pledged that we will not be drawn into the wider war, yet we've already shifted from defensive to offensive use of air bases on UK land. As almost 60% of the British public oppose the use of RAF bases in this war, will the Secretary of State for Defence commit to bringing back to this House the opportunity for open debate and full transparency on all of the factors that are leading to this rapid descent down the slippery slope?
Statements such as this, Mr. Speaker, are exactly the opportunity for members of the House to express their view, put their questions. But I say to the Honourable Lady, she is simply wrong. There has been no shift on the permissions granted to the US for specific purposes, and those purposes are defensive. Those purposes are defensive because they are limited to the Iranian missile and capabilities that are attacking our ships, our bases, our interests, and threatening our interests and our bases and our allies across the region. So the basis of the permission simply hasn't changed. And that was the confirmation that after meeting of ministers on Friday that was released by the government to confirm that.
Total crime.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I thank the Secretary of State for his statement. And despite talk of a complete and total resolution of hostilities from across the Atlantic, I agree with my honourable friend from Walthamstow that we can't give false comfort to our constituents that there won't be lasting economic and military consequences. So can I ask the Secretary of State when or what detail he can give us on the leading role he sees the UK playing in keeping the Straits of Hormuz open?
Well, Mr. Speaker, as the statement that the UK helped coordinate and signed at the end of last week set out, and as I've said to the House today, we are ready to play a leading role in efforts, including all options that may be necessary with allies to try and secure a resumption of commercial shipping and a freedom of passage through the Strait of Hormuz. That is likely to require significant de-escalation, but we are preparing all options. And as I confirmed to the House earlier on as well, I have put UK military planners into US Central Command, and their job is to help shape and prepare the potential coordination of such activity that must include a range of allies and multinational support.
So, Alex Sheldon.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Just further to the answer the Secretary of State has given, the Secretary of State has this afternoon confirmed to the House that mines have been laid in the Straits of Hormuz. Therefore, one of the biggest problems going to be actually getting vessels insured, whether there was a cessation of violence overnight, getting it insured. So may I ask the Secretary of State how quickly he can now give the other side of that coin to the markets, to the insurance companies, that even if de-escalation happened overnight, how quickly the insurance company have faith that the Strait of Hormuz would be demined. That's going to take a military operation led by Europe. The Americans won't get involved, we know that. So can I ask the Secretary of State how quickly can he say what the counterbalance is to the fact that he has confirmed this afternoon that the Strait of Hormuz have indeed been mined?
State.
I can't give the honourable gentleman a timescale. What I can say to him is that we are bending all our efforts in defence and more widely to contribute to the development of all options, and that those must involve allies. They've got to be multinational. And in the end, as he suggested to the House, the test will be the decision of commercial ship owners, crews and insurers about the safety that they can have about resuming their commercial trade through the Strait of Hormuz.
John Mantle.
What Donald Trump said at the weekend was that unless the straits were opened, he would obliterate Iran's power plants. I agree that could be extremely catastrophic, attacking a nuclear plant. But actually, as we've made clear to Putin, attacking power plants that supply power to civilians is actually against international law and clearly does move things on from defence to aggression. On that basis, can I ask the Secretary of State, and I agree with him, I hope the next 5 days secure peace, but can I ask him to confirm that UK bases will not be used to attack power plants, and that if there is to be a change of policy in that way, he asked the Prime Minister, yes, that we have that debate and we have the vote in this House, because I want my constituents to know that I'm not willing to support this type of escalation.
So stay.
The permissions for the use of UK bases for the US are defensive. They do not include the striking of Iranian power plants, which is the clarification that my right honourable friend has given me. And as I and as the Prime Minister have said, those principles of defensive actions and decisions with a sound legal basis and actions in coordination with allies to ensure a collective self-defence in the region will continue to inform the decisions and choices that this government makes.
Dougal.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. One of the things that unites the Prime Minister of Israel and the Supreme Leader of Iran is that neither of them can care less what the UK Prime Minister says, and it's difficult to imagine that the US President isn't in a similar camp. So with fiscal headroom evaporating, business confidence vanishing and household budgets being shredded by this war, what can the Secretary of State offer over and above the vacuous calls for de-escalation to ensure that people on these islands are protected from the ferocious effects of this war and the supply of energy?
So stay.
Mr. Speaker, I'm disappointed the honourable gentleman degrades the contribution that the UK is making to the collective defence of allies in the region, that he fails to recognise that the basing request from the US that we have agreed is an important and valuable contribution to the US operations and to our interests, that the decisions that the Prime Minister makes are in our interests, our national interests, and that he has also said that we will do what we can to, with allies, deal with the risk to worldwide energy supplies and prices. He's already seen us support the release of extra oil onto the markets. He's seen us as a government put in help for those on oil heating. And I've told the House that he will chair a COBRA this afternoon to look at exactly the sort of concerns the honourable gentleman is concerned about.
Speaker, can I put on record my thanks to the British Armed Forces who are working round the clock to defend British interests and British people as we speak. But my constituents in Rochdale made quite clear they want no part of this wider war being waged by the US and Israel. At the same time, they expect the robust defence of British interests and British personnel. So although I welcome the fact that he said neither of those Iranian missiles got anywhere close to Diego Garcia, can he reassure this House that the UK will play its full part in the defence of Diego Garcia should such a similar missile attack happen again?
So say.
Mr. Speaker, we will, as we have done, we will always defend our British personnel, we'll defend our British bases, And I know my honourable friend and his constituents in Rochdale will be proud of the fact that our RAF pilots have now flown nearly 900 hours during this conflict, exactly those purposes, and he will be proud of the fact that there are now more British jets in the region than there have been for 15 years.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Any assessment of this intervention must recognise that the Iranian regime has made the Iranian people pay with blood for
एक का डबल
पहले जांच फिर निवेश
निवेश पक्का नहीं
बुरा सपना देखा क्या?
लगा पैसे डूब गए।
और अगर ये सपना सच हुआ तो?
मतलब
सचित पोर्टल है ना, यहाँ शिकायत करो जिसे संबंधित संस्था तक आगे की कार्रवाई के लिए पहुंचाई जाएगी और सही कार्रवाई होगी।
RBI कहता है
सचेत बनिए, सुरक्षित रहिए।
They're elected governments, not just governors.
So state.
Mr. Speaker, I'm not sure that I really follow. I certainly don't accept what I understand to be the Honourable Lady's point. When I was in Cyprus a couple of weeks ago, I met with the Defence Minister. I met with the Chief of their National Guard, and he made clear to me that military cooperation is closer than it's ever been with the UK, and I've said that we're playing a leading role with the Republic of Cyprus in coordinating the increasing capabilities that are in the Eastern Mediterranean to help that sovereign base remain as protected as we can in the circumstances and in the face of Iranian threats.
Catherine West.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. And further to that point, could I thank the Minister for Europe for going to Cyprus last week, and also for the conversations between the Prime Minister and the President of Cyprus, and also what reassurance can he give my constituents where we have really deep ties and long-standing people-to-people ties with the people of Cyprus, that it's not just about British personnel, but it's about the wider Cypriot family.
So, can indeed, Mr. Speaker, I hope she will recognise, and I hope as the government of the Republic of Cyprus and their military recognise, that the steps that we've taken well before this war broke out to reinforce defences in Cyprus and across the region have been there not just to protect British personnel and step up defences of our base, but are indeed defending and helping protect the whole of the Republic of Cyprus and the island of Cyprus.
Dr. Alping.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. From the first moment that the attempted rocket launches towards Diego Garcia were reported over the weekend, there has been growing speculation, fueled mainly by Israel, that Iran's strike capacity now stretches far beyond what we previously conceived, far beyond the Gulf region. Given what the Secretary of State has said today, given that he has confirmed that these were Iranian rockets, which goes beyond the NATO Secretary General yesterday, can he just confirm how close those rockets came, or those missiles came to Diego Garcia? And what is the MOD's assessment now about the effective strike range of Iran's missile capacity? Does it stretch deep into Europe, and is the UK even now at risk?
So state.
The missiles that were fired in the direction of Diego Garcia, as I've said, fell well short. One came down and one was brought down well short. And in terms of the specific capabilities of adversaries like Iran and what they hold, those are certainly not details that he would expect or I will disclose to the House or in public.
Darren Paffy.
Madam Deputy Speaker, and can I associate myself with the comments of the Secretary of State when he commends our brave servicemen and women, far from hanging around as the Leader of the Opposition thinks they are doing. They are working night and day to protect us at home and abroad. Absolutely. And as one of the many members across this House who's been part of the Armed Forces Parliamentary Screen, I add my thanks to them. Precisely because, Madam Deputy Speaker, the first priority of any government is to protect British citizens. Can the Secretary of State give assurance to this House here and now that those facing Iranian aggression closer than any of us will have everything they need to defend our people, our bases and our allies?
Secretary of State.
I thank my honourable friend. I can indeed. As I reported to the House, we have the highest levels of force protection in place. Those are reviewed daily by the Chief of Joint Operations. They report to me each week. And I say to my honourable friend, he is completely right. When I was in Cyprus a couple of weeks ago, talking to the very pilots and crews that allow our F-35s and Typhoons to fly those defensive missions, as they have done from day one in this conflict, they were frankly insulted. The leader of the opposition had accused them of just hanging around. And we, on this side, there's never been an apology from the opposition for those remarks. And we on this side know that they're working flat out, knowing that they're doing a really important job to defend our personnel, our bases and our allies.
We've got many people that need to squeeze in, so questions need to be short and answers need to be just as short. Sir Andrew Smith.
Madam Deputy Speaker, can I just say to the right honourable gentleman that we can debate all of this about what the armed forces think or they don't think. I always think it's best to leave them out of these debates. However, there is an issue here at home, and defence of the realm is defence of home first and foremost. And we know that the IRGC, the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, have threatened us here on these shores endlessly for a number of years. Many colleagues either side of the House have called for them to be prescribed. As yet, in the middle of this war, we have not prescribed the IRGC. This would make the life of our security services so much easier if we did so. Will the Secretary of State please get up and say it is his determination that they should be prescribed and kicked out or arrested for all the awful deeds that they do, chasing, hounding and killing people on the British shores?
Secretary of State.
The right honourable gentleman makes his case. He knows, like I do, that our British services have foiled around 20 sabotage, assassination plots with the Iranian hand behind them on British soil. He makes the case for prescription. That is a decision in other parts of government, something that we keep under review and something that we will take in the broader view of the way that we are challenging, confronting and working with allies to deal with the Iranian threats.
Luke Charters.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. BBC News Ukraine recently published an outstanding report on the demand for drone interceptors like the British-made Octopus and Wild Hornet Sting drone. So will the government update the House on what work they are doing to bolster UK and Ukrainian drone interceptor production so that these devices can be in the skies defending against Shahid drones that are threatening British interests and Gulf partners' interests alike?
Secretary of State.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I'm proud to say there are interceptors in the skies above Ukraine now that have the British hand and British production behind them, working closely with Ukraine. The Octopus interceptor that he talks about is a special link up, Ukraine and the UK, and we look forward to being able to produce these en masse and return them back into Ukraine to help them defend their skies against Putin's invasion.
Todd?
6 days ago, the UK government's security group rightly launched a leak inquiry into the leaking of very sensitive information from the National Security Council. Now, I don't expect the Defence Secretary to comment on an ongoing inquiry, but does he agree on these principles that, first of all, the very least our armed forces expect when they're being sent into harm's way is the political leadership of this country doesn't leak secret and top secret information? And secondly, the principle, whoever it is, whether it is a cabinet minister or a senior official or junior official, that when caught, they will be sacked.
To state.
Madam Deputy Speaker, I don't think anyone can doubt the determination of the Prime Minister to prevent such actions or to take action required when there are such activities going on, and so I can give the right honourable gentleman my reassurance that that should be the case.
Jacob Collier.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Can I join the Defence Secretary in paying tribute to our civilians and armed forces personnel who are defending the UK national interests? And I've had the privilege to meet many of them overseas during my time in this House. Those serving overseas have been putting themselves in harm's way, and they will have families back at home who are understandably worried, especially given the situation with personnel from the US and France being killed. So can I ask him what support he's putting in place for the families back at home of those that are serving in the Middle East?
Secretary of State.
you.